Hey guys, Jake Carlson here, host of the Modern Leadership Podcast. Are you ready to focus on amplifying your leadership superpowers? Let's go! Good morning, my friends and fellow elite achievers. Welcome back to Modern Leadership, where each week we dive in with guest experts on topics that make us better leaders, entrepreneurs, and individuals. Today, let me welcome our guest expert, Chris Westfall. You're going to love this conversation. Chris is a sought-after business consultant, communications coach, keynote speaker, and the author, co-author, or publisher of 8 books, advising hundreds of thousands of leaders and entrepreneurs from high-growth enterprises, Shark Tank startups, and Fortune 100 companies. He's helped create multi-million-dollar revenue streams for businesses on 4 continents. He is the U.S. National Elevator Pitch Champion and the author of the brand new book, Leadership Language, Using Authentic Communication to Drive Results. Chris, it's so great to have you with us today. How are you?
Jake, I'm doing great. Thank you for that introduction, and thanks for having me on the show.
Well, it's an absolute pleasure, and there's so many exciting things to jump into. But before we do that, by way of intro, what did we miss? Who is Chris?
Well, there's obviously more to the story. And you did mention in my bio that I've been recognized as the U.S. National Elevator Pitch Champion. And people often wonder about that. I mean, what exactly does that mean? How did I gain that recognition? What does that title mean in terms of impact to my career and for the clients that I serve?
It's exactly what I'm thinking.
A few years back, I was looking at my Twitter feed on Twitter, and I saw a tweet that some folks were looking for the person who had the best 2-minute speech in the United States, the best elevator pitch. And this contest was called the 118 contest. In other words, the best elevator pitch was 118 seconds long, or at least that was the construct of the contest. And the setup was like this, Jake. They said, okay, so 118 seconds, 8 seconds to get someone's attention, and then 110 seconds to tell your story, because 110 seconds is the average length of an elevator ride in New York City from the time you push the button, wait for the elevator, the doors open, you get in, you take the ride. So 118 seconds. Now you're probably wondering, how did you read all of this in a tweet? Well, there was a link and I clicked through. Anyway, Jake, so I was fascinated by this idea, and I wanted to try my hand because I had been coaching clients and working with them on a number of different things. But the elevator pitch and the way that people presented themselves is a big focus for me at that time, and still in many ways. So I entered this contest. I went out and I recorded a video, 118 seconds long per the contest rules, and I had to go out and get votes on social media for my video. And I was in a contest with folks from universities, academics, entrepreneurs, people from the corporate world. It was a broad cross section. And in the course of the voting, Jake, I actually came in second place.
Oh no, close.
I thought, okay, well, I'm glad I played, But get this, Jake, the people who put together the contest, and in fact, the person who was at the head of it, a gentleman by the name of Jeffrey Hazlett. Jeffrey reached out to me personally and said, listen, Chris, we watched all the videos, and we're going to do kind of an American Idol voice kind of thing here. Second place in the voting, but first place with us. You're the grand prize winner. You're the national champion.
How incredible. Well, I want to ask you, what did you learn through this process? Because, a lot of us, we talk elevator pitches, right? And we are often in situations, maybe not in the elevator, but at a networking event or out to lunch, or where we bump into somebody at the bus stop or whatever we're doing, and we just have a short amount of time. What did you learn in your preparation and in the process of creating what ultimately ended up, and by the way, congratulations, what a great accomplishment.
Well, thank you so much. I'll tell you what I learned. Anytime you are recognized at any level, whatever that recognition might look like, whether you're getting a graduate degree or you've been promoted into a new role as a director or vice president or even to the C-suite, anytime you get a new recognition, the first question that should pop into your head is, now what am I going to do? In other words, how am I? If you truly are a leader, you look in the direction of impact. What am I going to do with this recognition? It's the exact opposite of resting on your laurels, right? And that was what showed up for me. Is I was grateful for the opportunity, but then I had to figure out how to turn this into an impact for others. So that's what I've been doing since I received the recognition. And I'll tell you, I mean, if I can, I'll tell you a quick story about how I was working with a software executive on his elevator pitch. And I said, give me your elevator pitch. Tell me what is your accomplishment that you're proudest of? And this guy stands up and he says, well, I'll tell you what I'm proudest of. My engineering team has over 125 years of combined experience. And I looked him in the eye and I said, so what? This guy looked at me and he says, hold on a second, Chris, you don't understand. Our company has been recognized as one of the best places to work in our metropolitan area here. For companies our size, we're the best of the best. And I looked him in the eye and I said, so what? And this guy says, Chris, look, we work with companies that are hundreds, if not thousands of times larger than we are. We work with the Fortune 500, and we have a great list of reference customers, and they love us. And I said, so what? Now, you can imagine, Jake, this guy, he got a little ticked, and he goes, Chris, I see what you're doing. Everything I say, you're going to say, so what? Let me ask you a question. Where do you get off saying, so what to me? And I said, well, I'll tell you where I get off. And I kind of hitched up my britches a little bit. And I said, I'll tell you where I get off. Here's why I say, so what? Because I am the U.S. National Elevator Pitch Champion. And you know what this guy said to me, Jake? He said,
so what?
What? Exactly. And here's the thing that I learned, and this is the leadership takeaway, is no matter what you've accomplished, if what you're talking about doesn't matter to your listener, it does not matter. And if you are throwing your accomplishments, your recognitions, your network in someone's face and hoping to impress them, I recommend that you stop. I recommend that before you get to a big fat so what, and maybe the people you talk to are more polite than the clients I serve, but people may not tell you so what, but that's what they're thinking. So the leader has to make what matters to you matter to the person right in front of you, and phrase your accomplishments and objectives and goals in terms of what it means to your listener, to your audience, to the team that you serve, the investors that you wish to attract. You see where I'm going with that?
Yeah, I absolutely do. And, as you were going through that story, which, by the way, is a great story, you're a great storyteller, which we love on this podcast. So continue to do that. We love your stories. I thought you were going to go in a different direction, because every time you asked so what, you got deeper. And you started with this 120 years of experience, and then you went down and you talked about how they are the elite in the industry. And then you went down and you talk about they're one of the best places to work for. And I thought you were going to come out at the end of that and say, hey, all of this stuff that we just identified, that's your elevator speech. These are all the great things that you're doing. But you went in a different direction, and you went with the so what, that people only care when they understand or relate to what you're talking about, which, for me, I hear U.S. National Elevator Pitch Champion, and I say, Chris Westfall is a guy I've got to get on my podcast, because this is important to me. Because when I look at things like elevator pitches, this is a guy who has taken this talent, this skill, and developed it to such a point and put enough emphasis in it to be recognized. And so for us, we're saying, so what? Because this is what we want to get better at. The other thing that I want to add to this, have you, Chris, read the book Smart Cuts by Shane Snow?
I haven't.
It's a terrific book, my favorite book ever written. But in there's a chapter where he talks about two people who got famous on YouTube. One of them is this girl who used to watch like Lady Gaga videos and decided she was going to create like how-to makeup videos. And then the other is this guy, and you may have seen the videos, the double rainbow guy who saw the double rainbows and, it like had this great moment out there looking at the double rainbows. And in the book, he talks about how both of them, about the same time, got the same number of likes on YouTube, like really grew initially through these two experiences that they did. But only one of them took what they did and took it to the next level. And so when you talk about being the U.S. National Elevator Pitch Champion, and you talk about, so what, it all matters what I do moving forward, how I take it on. And so that's a couple of points that I brought out of what you were saying. Did I miss anything else?
Oh, Jake, I think that's a great insight. I think that the thing that shows up for me when you were sharing is that leadership is about action. it's not just what you've accomplished, but what you do with it. And there are great leaders out there who have been highly educated. There are great leaders out there who have not been highly educated, and yet they still are able to create an impact. And I think that bringing your experience, your recognition to life for the people that you care about is the greatest service that any leader can provide. And that's the way it looks to me.
Well, we got to now switch gears and talk about this book, because you're a great storyteller and the leadership language, what you speak, is so important. So I want to start us off with this 2016 Harris poll and this stunning 69% of managers who aren't comfortable talking to their employees. So I want to ask you about the Harris poll and then talk to you about how that led to this brand new book, Leadership Language.
When I heard that statistic, that 69% of managers are uncomfortable talking to employees for any reason, I was stunned. And that number changes if it's a confrontational conversation or if you're having to do like a corrective action kind of thing. But the fact of the survey and what it points to is that the greatest challenge in business today is effective communication, having the courage to say the things that need to be said and being able to do that in a way that isn't off-putting, that isn't pushy, that isn't demoralizing, but that is actually inspiring. And I wrote Leadership Language to help people to know that there is a place that they can go so that they can study statistics and then defy them, that they don't have to be a part of that 69% that feels uncomfortable talking to employees, or being uncomfortable giving presentations, or being uncomfortable with moving forward in their careers, whatever those careers might be. So that's really the message behind Leadership Language. It's a story not about me or my experience, but it's about the reader's experience and about how new insights can create new results and again, help you to defy statistics and find confidence even in the most difficult circumstances.
Well, let me ask you, why are so many people, I mean, this is a stunning number. Why are so many leaders out there? I mean, these are oftentimes educated, very often experienced. You know, they know what they're talking about. In fact, you talk in the book about how every leader has this shiny vision. They know what they're trying to do. They know what needs to be said. Why is such a high percentage of our leadership uncomfortable talking to their employees?
Because communication is messy. And when you begin a conversation, you, by definition, are entering into the unknown. I mean, even if you've prepared a 47-slide PowerPoint deck and you are going in front of an audience, depending on who that audience might be, you may get questions after slide number 3. And you may say, please hold your questions until the end. And the audience may say, but we can't. We won't. And now all of a sudden your presentation has turned into a conversation and you've gone from what you've scripted to what is unknown. The thing that I point to in the book and that I try to share, well, there's a couple of things. First of all, is that uncertainty and discomfort don't have to go together. And leaders understand that uncertainty is a fact of life. I mean, we can plan and we can say the meeting is going to happen tomorrow at 9 a.m. and then Susan gets a flat tire and Jared, his kids are sick and the blueprints don't show up on time. I mean, there are all kinds of things that create uncertainty, which is not, I'm not trying to discourage the folks who are listening. I'm just saying this is the way the world works. And we plan as best we can. We put stuff on our calendar so that we can manage that uncertainty. But the leader's job is to say, uncertainty exists, but I'm not going to be uncomfortable with that, or I don't have to be. I don't have to be uncomfortable talking with my employees. I don't have to be uncomfortable giving a presentation. I don't have to be uncomfortable walking in front of Mr. Wonderful and Mark Cuban on Shark Tank. And if that sounds like a stretch, well, that's part of the insights that I put into the book is the way that I've helped my clients to navigate those waters, not only going on Shark Tank, but also in other high-stakes conversations, because discomfort and uncertainty don't have to go together. And in the book, I share this important insight, and that is that leadership is something that exists inside of all of us. And so many times we think, well, where does leadership come from? It comes from a title, or it comes from experience, or it comes from education, or it comes from being a subject matter expert. And I could point to example after example of people who didn't have the experience or the subject matter expertise. I mean, take a look at Mark Zuckerberg. Did he have the experience of running a multi-billion-dollar company?
I don't think he had experience running any type of company, right? I mean, he had just been a student.
That's right. And then he wasn't even a student because he left school to, and we look at that and we go, well, wait a minute, you have to be educated, you have to be this, you have to be that. And my question for you is, do you? I think that what Mark Zuckerberg had, and I don't know him, I can't speak on his behalf, but I imagine that what he had was a vision for himself and a vision for his company. And you could argue, and a vision from taking that idea from the Winklevoss twins. That's beside the point.
That's a whole different conversation, isn't it?
That is. I think, and maybe even a movie. Anyway, but you know what I'm saying. He had a vision, and that is the thing that I point to in the book, and I'll share it here because it's what I see, Jake, is that not all leaders have followers, but all leaders have to have a vision, and that vision challenges the status quo. Leaders are challengers. Leaders are ones who are challenging the status quo. And even if that challenge to the status quo is, I need this organization to be 1% more efficient tomorrow than they were today, that's by definition, that's a change from the way things are right now. And looking in the direction of your vision points you toward not the corner office or a bigger car or a better suit. Those external things are not leadership. Leadership is an internal journey. It is an inside job, and the fast track to creating the impact that you need means taking a look inside and finding that vision and finding a way to bring that vision to life in a way that is compelling, that's concise and clear. That's the key to leadership impact.
And it's important for the listeners to understand what you're saying here. Leadership is not the corner office. It's not the paycheck or the extra titles. Leadership is responsibility. And I think too many times, especially when we start talking about people like Mark Zuckerberg who had their success at a young age, that we get in this mindset that leadership is about the rewards. It's about the perks. I lived in Silicon Valley for 6 years, and while I was there, I saw it every single day. I'd go to Starbucks, and there I would see, 18, 22, 25-year-olds that thought they deserved the corner office. And I wanted to reach out and say, leadership is not the corner office. Leadership is who you are. It's a developmental process. It's something you become, and it's a responsibility. Now, I wanted to ask you, since we brought up Mark and we're talking about, kind of the lack of education possibly that he had and the lack of experience, do you have to, as a leader, have swagger? And what I'm saying is, do you have to kind of have that little something inside you that when people tell you dropping out of Harvard and starting, a picture company, a picture on the internet company is not a good idea, do you kind of have to have that swagger that says, nah, I think I got this?
Swagger means a lot of different things. I mean, if having swagger means some version of fake it till you make it, I would disagree with that, because I know some leaders that have created some very powerful results without swagger, without necessarily an overt self-confidence or charisma. Leaders look not in the direction of, am I looking the part? Do I look like I've got the swagger? Does charisma make me a leader? I don't see those things. Leaders look in the direction of service. They look in the direction of providing the greatest service. And when you take your attention off of yourself, that's where you find real results. You put your attention on what matters most, because listen, where you put your attention is where you find your results. And if we are focused on, who am I and how am I doing? That's sort of like playing a game while looking at the scoreboard. Who am I and how am I doing? I don't disagree that it's sometimes introspection can be useful, but when you are putting leadership into action, my viewpoint is focus on the people that matter to you, focus on the results that you need, focus on the game, play the game full out. Don't look over your shoulder and wonder, do I have enough swagger? Do I have, am I really making this happen? I had an interesting story that I share in the book. If I can, I'll share it with you, Jake, about this guy named Murray Wilcox, who I met. And let me tell you, Murray Wilcox is an extreme surfer. Guy lives in Cape Town, South Africa, 22 years old, and he surfs 15 to 25 foot high waves.
Monster waves. And Jake, I'm not a surfer myself, but I know from just the little research that I did that even a 10-foot wave can weigh as much as 400 tons. So if you screw that up, you're dead. So Murray is looking for these giant waves, and I asked Murray, I said, Murray,
when you were at the top of a 15, 20, 25-foot wave, I got to know, what is your mindset? What is going through your mind to help you to navigate, truly a life and death situation? What are you thinking of? And here's what Murray Wilcox said. Nothing.
Was he enjoying the ride? Or what's nothing mean? I'm gonna call him on this. I'm gonna say, okay, I want to go deeper.
I did too, because I'm like, Murray, I'm trying to write a book. I'm trying to help people. You got to give me this.
Nothing.
Yeah, you got to give me this mindset. What is the mindset? Because I want to know what, are you loading in attack pattern Delta 9, the wave runner routine that you, and here's what he said. He said, I'm thinking of nothing because I have to be in the moment. All I have is the moment. And where that wave is going to take me, I have to ride it. And I know that I will figure it out as it unfolds. And I sat there and I thought, man, how do you? But then I thought about it. I thought about other athletes that I've watched, sports teams that I enjoy. Folks, I'm a big fan of baseball. I'm taking this from Houston, home of the Houston Astros, so I love watching these athletes that in unexpected circumstances there's no playbook for what these athletes create. And there's no playbook for what Murray was creating. And I would submit to you, and I hope this doesn't make people uncomfortable, but leadership is not a script. It's not a playbook. It's not attack pattern Delta 9. It's a journey. It's an internal journey. And leadership happens moment to moment. And that's where it unfolds.
But there are things that we can do in preparation for that moment. For example, Murray spent hours, thousands of hours out on smaller waves to get ready for the big waves. He spent time in the big waves. He spent time, carrying rocks at the bottom of the water, holding his breath just in case he falls so that he can make it. And so what you're saying isn't that we don't prepare. It's that we prepare like the quarterback of the football team. We know what the play is going to be, but as soon as we hike the ball, we might have to change it up a little bit.
And the quarterback who is successful is the one who sees that moment and isn't worried about what the coach told him last week or how cool he looks in his uniform. No, he's focused on the game. And that is where leadership happens. And you're absolutely right, Jake. You know that that before Murray got on that wave, he had absolutely brought his surfboard to the beach. He probably had a wetsuit. He might even have had sunscreen on. He did prepare for the events. But there was that one day where he climbed onto a wave that was larger than any wave he'd ever faced before. And if it's true that you have to have the experience before you can become a leader, I would argue with that all day long, and I'll tell you why. Because it's been my experience working with entrepreneurs and helping student students to raise over $35 million in venture capital for new ideas. How can someone go from being a student to being a funded entrepreneur? The answer isn't experience. The answer is you have to have a vision. You have to have a vision that shows up in the moment, and you have to take action on that vision. That's where leadership really lives. So if people are out there going, man, I need 10,000 hours in order to be I would just question that all day long. Leadership is not 10,000 hours away. Leadership is one thought away.
I want to take you back just a couple of paragraphs before this and ask you something that you said jumped out to me as something I want to go deeper in. And that is when you were talking about the quarterback, you said at the moment of the snap, he's not worried about what the coach told him. And so as we look at our listeners to this podcast, all of us have people that we kind of answer to. It might be our clients, it might be our customers, it might be a boss or a manager that we have. And in the moment of action, as the ball is snapped, one of the things you said is you're not worried about what the coach said. And I want to ask you to go deeper on that topic for a second.
Tell me more. You're not worried about what the coach said. That's right. Because if you take your eye off the ball.
Well, I think sometimes we have this hesitation that I got to play within the lines. Like I gotta operate within the constraints or constructs of what the company has told me or given me. And so I think that kind of paralyzes us, or it stifles our creativity or our ability to create audibles because we're so worried about staying within the lines. And I'm just wondering if you've had experience talking with leaders and helping them work through this particular challenge.
Absolutely, because removing obligations is the place where leadership comes from, which is contrary to the way that business works, right? You need to have more obligations. You need to understand what it is that is expected of you. But once you have that understanding, it's time to get in the game. I mean, let's take a look at somebody like Drew Brees. And Drew Brees, the play is called, and the play calls for him to drop back and throw the ball from the pocket. But as you know, Drew Brees is not the biggest quarterback in the National Football League, although he is the most prolific and the best passer in the history of the game. So Drew Brees has to roll out. He's got to get out of the pocket so that he can see, or he's got to find ways within the pocket to work with what he's been given. And you could say, well, those are his limitations. And I would say, are they? Because here's the thing that I know. Drew Brees, the first time he took a snap as a professional quarterback, you know what happened? He dropped back, he was sacked, and he fumbled.
Welcome to the NFL.
Right. And now we know him as the greatest passer of all time. My point is that, and I'm not saying, well, you have to break all the rules and color outside of the lines, but the leaders that you admire, whether that's on the football field, in business and military service, whatever the case may be, they are the ones who are able to see the plan and see beyond the plan. And being able to take the first step in the moment is the key, in my observation, to peak performance. And when I am at my best, and this is true for my clients as well, it's not when I have 3,000 things on my mind. In fact, when I have 3,000 things on my mind, I can't find my glasses or my pen or my notebook. Because why? Because I'm all wrapped up around that. But when my thinking settles down, now I'm at a place where I can ride the wave, take the snap, play the game.
And do you think this is a challenge that a lot of our leaders are having right now? Because we are so busy. We have, all sorts of texting and emails. We have phone calls coming in. We have all sorts of assignments that we just don't take the time to be still, allow our minds to think and think creatively. And I think the leadership challenge moving into the future, this is just the gospel according to Jake. I think the leadership in the future is going to suffer from this inability to innovate or think creatively because we're so focused in the day-to-day.
Jake, I'm a believer in the gospel according to Jake. I think you're absolutely right. And IBM even points us in this direction. IBM did a survey a few years back where they went and asked 1,500 business leaders all over the world, Canada, Japan, the United States, England. They asked 1,500 business leaders, what is the number one quality that you look for in a leader? And the answer wasn't business acumen or financial skills or great education or charisma or even communication. Number one skill, creativity. And not creativity like arts and crafts, but the ability to create something new, something that has not gone on before. And as we continue to rush forward with new advances in technology, AI, and all these things, and new apps on our phones that show up every day, we're bombarded by millions of messages. And I want to just share this quote that I just love from a guy named Harari. He's an Israeli social scientist, and he wrote this book called Homo Sapiens that I'm reading right now. And anyway, Harari says that in the olden days, knowledge was power. Today, power means knowing what to ignore and finding a place of calm and finding a way to put your attention on what really matters instead of what's happening on Pinterest or Instagram. Not that those things aren't important, but that's not exactly leadership focus. That is the key to finding success. And so many folks, when I share this idea, they say, well, okay, so we're going to talk about mindset. We're going to work on our mindset and how do we get our mindset into the place where we need to be. And I borrow a page out of Murray Wilcox's handbook. I say, I don't think there's a mindset. I think that what shows up is that when we recognize that we are thinking and we have that understanding, there's a new way of looking at the conversation. In other words, what I'm saying, Jake, is that just because a train of thought shows up doesn't mean you have to ride that train. And that's when the conversation opens up, and that's when the possibilities show up, when you recognize that, yeah, I've got some thinking going on. Yeah, I've got millions of messages and things bombarding me and obligations and stuff like that. When you have the ability to look away and look at what really matters and not ride that train of thought, that's where true power, true performance, and true leadership comes from.
This is such a fascinating topic, and I'm looking at our time, and I'm going to ask our listeners to hang with us for just another couple of minutes because I want to ask you this question that's been on my mind the entire podcast. And even though our time is short, let me ask you about blind spots and how we can discover our blind spots by thinking like an investor. This fascinated me, this idea, and so I can't let you go without jumping into this just a little bit.
Well, the blind spot is a scientific fact, right? It's where your optic nerve hits the back of your eye, and we all have blind spots physically. It's the way our eyes are made, but that's also true in business. And there are things that we can't see. It's the old quote. It's impossible to read the label of the jar you're in. And thinking like an investor about blind spots means a couple of things. One, acknowledging that blind spots exist, acknowledging that none of us is as smart as all of us. And nobody has all the answers. So thinking like an investor, how can you invest in seeing what might be hidden from you? And it's hidden not through any fault of your own. It's just the way things work. There are certain things that we don't see. That's true for me. That's true for you. It's true for people in my family. It's just how we are. And so thinking like an investor means how can you invest in seeing what's hidden? And in my experience, that's what has led so many clients to work with me, to talk about what it is that they don't see, the conversation that's missing, the impact that they seek, and they feel the frustration because it's not there, but they don't know where to find it. And I don't show up like some guru and take them to the top of some magic mountain. I simply look in the direction at what my clients are seeing and offer a perspective, a shift, and an understanding based on principles that helps people to see things in a new way. And like an investor that understands how to leverage that investment, when people have a new understanding of the way things work, typically, the smart folks that I work with, they are able to make things work for them. And that's how thinking like an investor leads you to make an investment in your greatest asset, yourself.
And this is kind of a hat tip to coaching as well, because I hear what you're saying, that leaders are going to have these blind spots, and having somebody that helps you to identify what they are and work through them is such a valuable resource in growing as a leader. Well, Chris, this has been an absolutely fascinating conversation, but we got to get to my favorite part of the podcast, and that is adding a little personal to go along with this business conversation by going through the questions from Learning from Leaders. How does that sound?
Sounds great. Let's do it.
All right. Question number 1. Book currently on your Kindle or bedside table. What are you reading?
You got it. It's Homo Sapiens by Harari.
Yeah. And this is a book that, correct me if I'm wrong, but Bill Gates basically said this is one of the best books ever written, bought a whole bunch of copies and passes them out all the time.
It's a long book, but it is really powerful. And I can understand why Mr. Gates did that. I can't say that I understand it personally because he hasn't responded to my friend request on Facebook.
Yeah,
but
I'm still waiting as well.
I know you're waiting as well.
Yeah. I'm sure he's just
too.
busy.
I don't know. Hit me back, Mark. What's up? Yeah, he's busy. Yeah, but that's a great book, Homo Sapiens, and then the follow-up is Homo Deus, and that's the one that's next for me. So,
well, thank you. How about your leadership superpower?
The leadership superpower. Here's what I'm going to go with, Jake. I'm going to say the ability to listen. Because I'll tell you, my friend, I talk for a living, but if you want to know how to have a more powerful conversation, start with being a better listener. And it's something that I work on every day to make sure that I really hear and understand the clients that I serve, and I help them to be better listeners as well. So listening is my superpower. That's all I'll say.
Yeah, it's a terrific superpower. Talking gets you in the door. Listening takes you to the top. How about a leadership philosophy quote or mantra, something that you live by?
I'm going to go with Nelson Mandela. It always seems impossible until it's done. And if there's something right now, you're listening to this and you're thinking, man, it's impossible. We've tried everything. I would submit to you that you've tried everything except what works. And a new solution, new innovation, it's always in the same place. It's always one thought away. It's just finding that thought and engaging with it and taking action. That's the key. So yeah, it seems impossible until it's done. Nelson Mandela.
I love it. Audrey Hepburn said, even the word impossible says, I'm possible.
Yes, indeed. Yes.
All right. Our final question then is the book that you most often gift to friends, family, or colleagues.
Well, Jake, right now that book is Leadership Language because that's the one that just came out, and I'm sharing that with folks every opportunity that I can because I think it's the book that can make a big impact. Some other ones that I really like. There's a book called Somebody Should Have Told Us by a guy named Jack Pransky, and it's not typically talked about in business circles, but it's a powerful book. It's a short read, it's a quick read, but it talks about how our thinking creates our experience, and it's a book that made a big difference for me. So I don't know if I can have two in this category, but I would say Leadership Language, but also that book, Somebody Should Have Told Us by Jack Pransky.
You can have two. And to go back to your book, if you don't believe in what you're writing, if you don't believe in the product that you're creating, then you shouldn't be creating it. You're not the leader that you need to be. And when you believe in it, then you want to gift it. I mean, I think that's a very valid answer there. All right. Before I let you go, any last bit of advice and how can we connect more with you, Chris?
Well, a couple of things that I want to offer. If anyone listening would be interested in downloading a chapter from the book, I have that online, and I'd be more than happy to offer that. And Jake, you can, when you post this, I'll send you that link so you can put it on there. The other thing that I want to offer to everyone listening is that I have a YouTube channel that has over 2 million video views, and it's got a number of videos on there about communication, confidence, leadership, connection, engagement. And if that's of value to you, it's a free resource that's out there, and I want to encourage people to take a look at it. It's youtube.com/Westfall Online. And Westfall Online is where you can find me on Instagram and on Twitter and also on LinkedIn. And that's my website, westfallonline.com.
And we're going to link it all up on the show notes, and we're going to send people over there because you are a fascinating storyteller. You clearly have mastered the art of speaking, and we love listening to you. Thank you so much for joining us this day and this morning on Modern Leadership and being our guest expert.
Jake, thanks for the opportunity. Great to talk with you.
All right, my friends, you've heard it said, right? Time flies when you're having fun. This was one of the fastest interviews I've had in a very long time. I sure enjoy having Chris on the podcast. Someone who's a storyteller like myself, a kindred spirit. We just got into a bunch of these stories, and I just loved going down this path of talking about leadership and the language of leadership. Of course, as we talk about every week, this will be on the show notes. Links to his YouTube page, links to download a page or a chapter out of his book. All of that will be found at jakeacarlson.com/ML105. And there you can dive in a little bit deeper to what we were just talking about. One of the things that really jumped out to me is this uncertainty and discomfort don't need to go together. And our ability to audible, our ability to change up the play when we need to change up the play is so vitally important as leaders. And so until next week, I want to wish you the very best of days, an even better life, and of course, stay awesome. Thanks for listening to the Modern Leadership Podcast. You can find me on Facebook at Speaker Jake, on Twitter at Jake A. Carlson, and of course the website, jakeacarlson.com. See you there.